Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Green Agenda. Today is Season 5, Episode 5 of The Green Agenda. So, first and foremost, as you all know, we like to thank our partners and sponsors, the Environmental Defense Fund and the Climate Action Campaign. Tonight's episode that I'm very excited about, y'all know I'm always excited, will focus on green pathways, integrating environmental justice in public schools. This conversation will examine how career and technical education, or CTE, programs can incorporate environmental justice principles, preparing students for green careers while fostering awareness of social equity in sustainability efforts. Tonight we have Candice Mott, very excited. We had a little bit of conversation, and so I know that this is going to be another great episode. She is the CTE Performance Accountability Coordinator for DC's Office of the State Superintendent of Education. All right, and I'm not going to keep y'all long. We're going to get right into it. Before we dive too deeply into this conversation, Candice, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey? You were telling me how you transitioned from a teacher in the classroom, third generation teacher, to leading the nation's capital in green career technical education.
Gotcha. And I'm happy to be here, Kayla. And so my name is Candice Mott, and I currently work for DC's Department of Education, OSSE, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. It's a very fancy way of saying
That's
that.
That's an acronym. That's serious.
Very fancy way of saying that. But and I support our career and technical education secondary programs here in the district. And so how do I get here? And so I was just telling Kayla that I was a third generation teacher. My grandmother taught some before becoming a homemaker. My mother was also a career and technical education teacher. And so it's just in our blood, I guess, what I would say. My sister also was a career and technical education teacher before becoming an assistant principal. And so CTE is really what we do and what we're very passionate about. I will say that I always tell people that I went to a school, for an optional school in Memphis. I'm from Memphis. And we, were very focused on college. Mm-hmm. I remember taking the ACT in middle school and all of those things. But I love to do hair. And so by the time I got to my senior year, I had a hard conversation with myself after, not reading my books for the summer and said, you probably should not be in these AP classes anymore.
You probably need to take a step back. You were reevaluating.
What you want to do? And so my mother was able to get me into the cosmetology program at East Vocational Center at the time, while I was still enrolled at Central High School, the oldest high school in Memphis. And from there is kind of where my CTE journey begins. And so I was a licensed cosmetologist while I was in college.
I could tell because I've been wanting to say your hair. Okay, sorry. I needed to get that in there. Continue.
And so I really believe in, students having options for careers. I really believe that. I heard someone say, and I wish I could remember the person's name to give them credit, that you ask kids what problems they would like to solve versus asking them about the jobs
what they want to do.
That they want to do. And I think that the problem you want to solve will take you the furthest in life in your careers. And so I knew that I love to do hair. I went down that road. I eventually became employed as a cosmetology teacher at the one of the technology centers in Tennessee, in Nashville, where I went to school for cosmetology. I went to the Memphis location. I worked at the Nashville location. And then my problem to solve became how to make sure that students had options to be in CTE, to be in CTE programs. And so because I just believe that the combination of making sure you have your academics and your technical skills is really important. It's creating a well-rounded human, and it's taken me, really far. I remember my guidance counselors in high school didn't really think that I was going to go to college. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go. You haven't met my mama? I'm going.
Look, be for real.
We're going. We're going to take this detour to finish cosmetology, but we're going.
Yeah.
We're going. And I did. Finished cosmetology, enrolled in college the next summer, literally, and still finished in under 4. So we got it done.
Check the box.
Check the box. We got it done. We were going. And I was, I like school. So, it's fine. And so I think about the fact that when I got to really teaching cosmetology, the why became just making sure that people have access to programs, to knowledge, to have careers in spaces that not only benefit them, but also I realize, there's a wealth gap. I realize that especially when you teach cosmetology, you usually have students that come from marginalized communities, low-income students. And so you really get a chance to be around a variety of type of people, and you kind of see the issues and problems and things that are existing in the community. And while you can't solve every problem, I do know that having a sustainable career, how careers can change communities, and how they can really be beneficial to families.
Yeah.
And so from there, I'm a teacher for a while. I moved back home to Memphis. I taught in Memphis for a couple of years before moving here. And my major is actually family and consumer science. And so
that's interesting.
Yes. And so that's what home ec is now. It's called family and consumer science. And I had a focus in fashion, merchandising, and marketing. So I have taught food and nutrition. I have taught fashion. I have taught culinary. I have taught hospitality. I have taught personal finance. I have taught
a little bit of everything.
Everything. And so all equipping me to have the role I have now, though, is supporting multiple career programs here in the district. And through that role and knowing Latricia, especially as Latricia grew this work with Young, Gifted, and Green over the last decade, it has made me more keenly aware of environmental literacy and justice. And so when the opportunity at work also came available to be on our environmental literacy committee, I offered, I was like, yes, I'll do it.
Yes.
And so I have had the opportunity to merge environmental work with the work that I do overall in CTE here in DC.
I love a good introductory, like the hero's journey. I love that story, especially in yours, in pointing out the crossroads, so to speak, that youth face, like right at 18, like high school, senior in high school, where everyone is looking at our youth with the expectation that they know what they will do for forever, basically. Not forever, but what path or trajectory they will set them on, which will set them up for forever, right? And that is such, I remember, because it wasn't that long ago, that being such a challenge, and that so often is, right? And youth are so often, especially in generations prior, I think this has become more flexible in my generation, but for a very long time, there was like one path. It was like, this is the path. You go to college, like your mom said. You go to college, and that is the pathway to success. Like, we not having too much conversation about anything otherwise, right? But what I really appreciate about your story is when faced with that crossroads, you made a both and. Like, you created a both and, right? That, we're going to take this little detour and honor your passion, your desire. And I appreciate how that opened up pathways for you to figure out what problem you wanted to solve, right? To have a greater understanding of your why and your reasoning for working. And I think that that's so great. What I also appreciate, and what I think is sometimes under marketed to youth, is the as you said, the importance of those technical skills. Like, that is so, it's so incredibly important for you to understand that there are more roads than one. There are more paths than one, right? That there's so much opportunity. Even if it's not the end all be all, you don't lose anything by gaining a technical skill, right? It's not as
I call it a toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you got to solve a problem, you often have to have tools to solve the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about college and career choices as toolbox, like, oh, this certification, toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
This class, toolbox. This skill set is a toolbox. And so you put all those things together, and so you are able to continue to work on the project, the problem, the issue for whatever duration of time that is.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it as if you think about it more globally in your life, I think that's when you can, when we know when you're solving problems, or I would say building a house, you're like, I need to pivot.
Yeah.
We need to stop. We need to reevaluate. We were going to put the counter over here, but now we're going to put it over here. And I think life is that.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about career education, that's the conversation to have, and I've had with my own child, right? It has evolved over the years, and I'm very passionate about career education and decisions. And whereas you're not making the decision for the rest of your life, but you want to make sure that you have the tools, you're equipped for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. Like, this is not one decision forever, but you have to have the tools in place to do the work.
Yes, that's so good, especially when, and we talked about this, I believe it was last season, there is such a shortage of folks with technical skills because so many people were pushed in a certain direction. There's a struggle to find, construction workers and, folks to do the engineering, and like some of these big green projects that we have coming down the line require a workforce with technical skills that we haven't trained yet. Not fully, not to meet the greater need that we have. And so that work is so incredibly important. And it leads me to my next point, which is, how can CTE programs incorporate environmental justice principles to prepare students for green careers? And what are some examples of successful programs that have achieved this?
So when I think about this question, I've thought about, one, the difference between environmental justice and environmental literacy. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're embarking upon really trying to get the environmental literacy part down first, right? And which is just acknowledging environment in general within our curriculums, within our frameworks, within I know with our environmental literacy work at work, thinking about it from a K through 12 perspective. And so those are some of the things when I think about these two things. But when I think about environmental justice principles, something that we toy with a lot, and I often say, hey, look, we got to get the folks' knowledge down first. I say it's very hard to teach or people to have an environmental justice mindset. Although it's crazy because environmental justice, we have social justice things down, but it's kind of like when it comes to the environment, we don't move the social justice tenets that direction, right? Because they're very, while there are some things that are different, there are aligned. A lot of similar. They're very much so aligned, right? And so I think getting people to, what I'm seeing is one, getting people to move from transition environmental literacy to the next, which I would say justice is 2.0. Because I would say you can't.
That's the 200 level.
Yeah, because you can't advocate for things that you don't understand fully. And so in our CTE programs, what I think that looks like is, one, that we have in our middle and high schools environmental standards, right? So that are layered into our programs and the things that our students do, because there is so much environmental literacy in most careers at this point. Even when I think about cosmetology, I think about those the air quality. I think about because I mean honestly we've been in salons of old where we don't have ventilation.
Look, the perm, the chemicals.
Yes. And so when you think about probably also too the environmental impact of people that have worked in, like someone was telling me one day, my daughter said, you weren't even wearing a mask when you were pregnant with me, and you were doing those relaxers and hair color and things like that. And I said, you right.
You sure right. Well, here you are.
You are. I guess you intact. And so, but environmental justice tenet is ensuring that workplace and that you work in an environment that's free of toxins, and that you advocate for that that you have. And so, like, looking at ventilation and things. Well, think about our students in the environments they go to school, right? I often sit in schools. I was just at a school the other day, and I was like, oh, I am sneezing. There's dust. Right?
Yeah.
And I often sit in places and I said, man, there's dust.
Yes.
So all of those types of things matter. And on a more global scope, that we have students with asthma, allergies, and other conditions that are impacted by that. But how do they know to advocate, right? And that's when you have to put those environmental literacy tenets in your curriculums, in those stuff that you do, so students know, hey, you know what? I'm not supposed to have a headache and sneeze every time I come into this classroom. I am not supposed to have an asthma attack when I come to school.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to have. I remember when my daughter was at one of her schools, her middle school, and they had dust from the construction work. And they had to get air purifiers and things like that within their community. And it was a lot of dust, but someone had to advocate for that. And a lot of parents and a lot of students don't know that. And so I think that is one big step, is just trying to really increase capacity and knowledge. And as far as our CTE programs, is then kind of that next level after that is the students' work-based learning. When we talk about CTE, work-based learning is the foundation of what CTE is. Like, you learn the technical information, like you learn academic information, but you gotta have somewhere to apply it. And so what I would say is even thinking about internships, we do need more opportunities for students to participate in internships that are environmental focused, and with people who have an environmental lens. So we have, like, say for example, construction. And construction, I always think about environmental careers and jobs are kind of like in tiers. Like, I think the obvious ones are, plumbing, construction, HVAC, those ones. So our students are participating in those, but are they participating with companies that have an environmental lens, right? Because if they're just still doing the same things, then they're not getting that information. So more internships or even just job shadowing work, those types of things, where there is some focus around environment. And then I think about those next tier jobs where you have your policy advocates folks, or like I said, even when you talk about indirect culinary, we talk about cosmetology, where you have environmental tenets within those jobs, where we also maybe just work with our professionals that support our kids to just provide them more information. I think that when we talk about CTE doing the work, there is work happening, but it's also this thing of where we're still trying to build people's capacity.
It's the work behind the work.
Yes, that's the thing. I think about here. So, like I said, we in my work, what I have done is in our CTE program standards for each one of our programs of study, we have career ready standards. So, I definitely advocated for us to have an environmental literacy standards, so that it would prompt instructors when they're talking about making sure they have a career ready student, that they are thinking about environment.
Yeah.
So we didn't have those tenets in any of our standards at first, except for the ones like, again, construction, HVAC. So now it's a part of the framework for all programs. All 42 programs that we offer, we have environmental literacy as a part of those standards. I think about, we have schools such as Friendship Tech Prep, who has the Energy and Natural Resources program at their school. And so they're doing really amazing things. They are looking at greenhouses. They are creating, thinking about ways to create natural energy, how to solve some of those problems. Funny, though, they're next door to Homeland Security. And so they're even trying to do things with drones. They're collaborating with the IT program with drones and things. And so the Homeland being next door kind of
cuts it down a little bit.
But
they be like, not too much.
Yes,
not too much. Yes.
But they are doing great work to increase those students. Like it's a knowledge set that they probably really hadn't been exposed to. And so I've loved to see the work. I've loved to see the work that they have been doing. They have worked on like water sourcing, and so now they've because a big part, like they do some ag stuff within the program as well, but what they have really been looking at again is how do we collect water, how do we generate water for our space, how do we conserve energy within our part of the building. Within DC, over the few years, we have also had like the solar panel companies take some of our students on as interns. We've had students working at the Arboretum, and so like I said, we have good bones in place in regards to building everybody's capacity with environmental justice and environmental literacy programs. And then I thought about a program I had seen in Philly, and they are partnering with Villanova, and so looking at geosciences. So they have students that stay on campus for part of the summer and work with their geosciences program to focusing on environmental issues within their community. And so that's like I said, that's the big connection is, hey, what's going on with me? What's going on with us? Let's take a minute and assess what's going on here. And then let's see about this knowledge and see how can we put those things together.
Yes, I think, you said so much, and it's so funny because as you were talking, I was like, pin that, and I think I lost track of a couple of my pins, but I'm gonna try to bring them back. I think the underlying theme of everything that I was thinking about while you were talking, though, is exposure. Exposure is so key to support youth to figure out what problem they want to solve, right? Like that, the opportunity you said, the beginning, one of the things you started with in your framing was that there is a difference between environmental literacy and environmental justice. That first, in order to get into the justice, you have to have an understanding. Like in all things, first seek an understanding. And so it is so incredibly important that we create opportunities for youth to see the way that environmental justice runs throughout everything, right? Like that has been, even for me as the host, one of the great pleasures of this show for me is seeing that, wow, like environmental justice is connected to this, and it's connected to this, and it's connected to this, and it's connected to this. It's connected to everything, right? And that like multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary public health lens of the environmental aspect is incredibly important to show folks that even if you maybe, because I remember I had a close friend in high school who was very passionate about environmental justice. And we used to joke she was like our tree hugger. She was like our tree hugger.
And that's what people
friend.
see with this thing. They think it's tree hugger.
Yes.
Right? And it's like, you're the tree hugger. But no, this impacts all of us.
This is so much more. Like, so I remember just being like, she's a tree hugger and she just wants to make sure we don't deforest and like all these things. But as I've gotten older, and even though, you know, at the time I still appreciated her interest, but I was very limited in my understanding of her interest, right? In my mind, environmental was just like the trees and the water and as I've gotten older, and again through this experience and the exposure for me and having these conversations, realizing that environmental is in your built environment, it's in the air, it's in your work environment, it's in the infrastructure of your city. It is like there is nowhere that you can go or nothing that you can touch or consider that is not in some way related to our environment. And so I think that exposure is so incredibly critical, especially when we talk about the insufficiency that we're facing with supplying workers because we had such a drive for the auto industry, for example. Like, the auto industry is fuel, honey. Like, they get their employees. Okay, them cars get built. Okay, the line is full. But as far as shifting perspectives now, right, and understanding that we really are in a state of crisis to a certain extent with our environment, not to a certain extent, pretty much in general, like, period. Yeah. Hard stop. We are in a state of crisis. Like, our environment is. Our air is more polluted than it's ever been. Our water is, more polluted than it's ever been. The state of pollution and climate change and our infrastructure and the built environments and the concrete and all of these different things that interplay, our environment is struggling in such a way that it will touch everybody.
Beyonce can't have a show without a torrential. It's funny, without a torrential rain. Like, think about that. Like, it's not just little rain.
No,
when it rains, it's torrential, and that's not common.
Yes,
that's not what's supposed to be occurring. Like, this is like, even when it is tornado season. But the amount of rains and things that have occurred
is crazy.
And when you talk with a kid about a job, right? When you talk about, we're getting, here in DC, we're getting a new stadium, where now we can have a covered stadium. But that's to combat climate change, also, so that you can have your events, right?
Even when it's torrential.
Or, snow is snowing in times and spaces where it has not snowed, or the impact of snow. And so when you have students, and I even talked to my daughter and her friends about, we talked about riding the metro, riding the train, and the fact that, students, like, we have so much climate change and our weather is becoming more and more inconsistent, or not indicative of the area that you live in, where you need different clothes, where you need to think about, like, and the buses are not coming the same, the trains are not coming the same. The train, the metro system, they need workers, because they're having to also support the rail system now due to climate. They have to provide different services when it's cold or when it's hot. The tracks get too hot, right? And so this is
important work.
They're having to resurface trains, but we do not have enough people going into these jobs, and it gets into a different conversation. But I think that when we, again, going back to problems that you want to solve, going back to that everybody is important in our society. Yeah, I think that's where we might also see a change in people embracing certain roles and certain jobs. Yeah.
Because there's a stigma. Yeah. Like, let's address the elephant in the room, all right? That there is such a stigma with trade jobs, like with working a trade, rather, like as if they are less important, as if these are jobs, like they don't, in our society hold the same honor as a white collar, you know, sitting behind a desk.
But in 2025, especially now, and I'm not saying 100 years ago it wasn't science, it's science. I bought a house and I didn't realize that you have to repoint bricks. You know how much it costs to repoint a whole house bricks? Like, it's five-figure digit number.
Ooh.
And so, but it's science to it because
that just hurt my heart.
The more precipitation you have, the more it loosens the mortar and the bricks. You get, and then if your bricks are loose, you lose energy in your home, right? And so to conserve the energy in your home, you got to have good windows. You got to have, so building a house is science.
Yes, it's not just you work with your hands like as if it is a mindless job. Like that seems to be the perception that if you take the route,
bricks impacts, and how you actually stack bricks also can impact how they how your house or building is insulated and things, and even thinking about earth. It's so many things. And so I think that in our pathways, those are the conversations that we have to have. But again, I think you and I have them because we know have taken on the wanting to know more about environment and things like that. But given in a world where there's so much to know about, I think that's the gap that we possibly have is, hey, educators, hey, leaders, hey, parents, let's try to build our capacity.
Explore other pathways.
Yes.
And I think that's also important when you think about, even if we were to separate it, right, from the environmental importance, right, the social importance, the need in our country, if we just got down to the fact that there are so many youth who college is not the route for them. Like where like maybe that's not clicking for them. It's not clear. That's not their pathway, or maybe influencing isn't the route for them. There are so many youth that need other options, right? We need to have a diversity of options in order to serve the diversity of youth that we have, right? And I think the stigmas that exist and the lack of knowledge, the lack of understanding that people have around technical skills and trade jobs creates deficits in what really could be great opportunity. Like you said, a part of what supported you to find your why and find your way is because you nurtured the passion that you had in cosmetology, and that set you on a greater pathway to be able to expose other youth to these opportunities and to be able to build pathways and make it easier for more youth to gain these opportunities. But I think we I don't even know what it is, if it's historical, and I think and you could maybe speak to this more, like the difference between as Black and brown communities worked to catch up, so to speak, if a part of that stigma is in concern that you won't be able to catch up or wage the gap if you don't take the same pathway, if you don't go to college, if you don't do it this way, then you won't be able to wage it. Is there a difference?
I mean, honestly, now, as far as wages and jobs, most often not, no. Like, there are some careers that just tend to, like, I think engineering, IT, right? Like, those tend to just, when you entry-level pay, is just higher, right? When we look at pay. In most cases with other careers, no, you're not going to be behind. And that's why we also, though, work-based learning and internships are a big part of your they should be a big part of your trajectory. So, like, for example, here in the district, a lot of our students are a part of our career ready internships programs and our advanced internship programs, which are school year. And the career ready internships are during the summer. And so, like, for example, my daughter did an internship at NIH last summer, and she worked in
tell us what NIH is.
National Institutes of Health. And she worked in their Genome Institute last summer doing some
That's an
research.
Amazing experience.
But they also make $17 an hour, right?
You ate with that.
Right? And so now when someone asks you your base pay from this when they don't know you they work you worked the internship, but your base pay is $17 was $17 an hour.
Tell me more.
Right. And so now you can ask for more. So now
exactly,
I'm caught up.
Yes.
And so the living wage index here per MIT, I think it's about $23 an hour now, your living wage. So the kids are very close to that now. And so when they get these other job opportunities, there isn't much difference. It's just you need to stay the course of something. And so if you're going to stay the course of college, you stay the course of college. If you're going to enter an apprenticeship, you stay the course of the apprenticeship. If you're going to go directly into workforce, you go into that. And what we're also seeing is that there is a high demand for the green green jobs. There's a high demand for those jobs that are very much so environmental aligned and then or environmental adjacent. Right. And even when we talk about, like, my daughter wants to be a reproductive endocrinologist, or she wants to work in genetics, she also wants to focus on, she's talked about how environment impacts certain people with certain diseases, or babies with certain issues, or mothers, and how their environment impacts their pregnancies and things. So all of those things, I think, again, creating those connections for the kids are important, and they will make the money.
The money will come.
The money will come. But being in something that's in demand, being in a career that's needed, and then again, thinking about green careers, which aren't growing. They've grown. I think Advanced CTE, which is one of our professional organizations for state CTE leaders, they reported in 2019 that green jobs had grown by 50%. The demand was like 50% across the country. Right? And so, especially when we have people retiring out, I know that I went to a building inspectors event last year. I mean, not last year, last week. They're like, look, we want to train these kids for these tests. Let's get these kids trained for the tests, right? There's a need. There's a desire. And so I think, like I said, the whole why you go to college and why you do career, it's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother episode.
It's a whole nother, it's very deep. It's a whole nother episode. But what I will say is that if we really truly focus on, hey, you know what? If you need to make money, let me show you some ways to do it. And if we want to really focus on getting kids in green careers and jobs, let me show you how to do it. And therefore, you can become an expert in a space that still has a high demand, and it is very niche. At the same time,
which is job security.
Which is
jobs to have a skill set that where there is great need, high demand, and low supply, that is job security. Like, look, and you starting right up next to living wage. Please don't play with me. I might just go back. I might just have to circle the block on that one. Okay, so I'm going to move us forward because I'm curious about, we just talked shortly about some of the considerations when you talk cross-cultural, right? When you're looking at, disparities in wealth and those kinds of things between black and brown communities, and the power majority, so to speak. I'm curious about what are the key social equity considerations that that CTE instructors should prioritize when they're developing EJ-focused curricula, and how can they ensure that their teaching practices promote inclusivity, considering our social landscape.
I think, here in D.C., we are one of those school systems that's, more majority people of color than not. But I think that when we talk about it, I think it's representation. Who is doing that work? Who are the Kaylas? Who are the Latricias? Who are those people that are doing the work that the people look like me? And again, there was also a stigma associated with environment where people who look like us weren't the tree huggers. So who are the black tree huggers? Who are the people of color tree huggers? And so I think that matters. I met someone, her name is Jerry Taylor, and she works now for forestry organization, where they're trying to get more. And she has created a guide. It's called black faces and green spaces. And so this whole workbook and guide and everything has all these black people in it. They need all these different types of jobs. It's a workbook. They got worksheets and stuff. And I really in this really early high school, middle school focus, maybe late elementary. And I think that's the kids that you can grab, right? And so I was like, Jared, I love this. Like it's so beautiful. And I think, but there's not a lot of curriculum that looks like that in the environmental literacy or justice space. And I think that representation matters. I think simple things like guest speakers I don't know that we create environmental justice advocates, in the next, in droves in the next 10 years. But I think that in our lifetime, we will see that this grow, right? And so I think that through CTE, it really is just having that representation, having as many materials possible that connected to students that to their communities and people within their communities and things like that. I think those are the ways that we get kids that takes this work, like I said, it takes this work forward. And then I think about just access to, and so we need our partners and schools to. That's
the next point I was going to take you to, so keep going.
to connect. Like, look, we have to save our world.
Yeah.
Right? We have to save it.
And it'll take all of us.
Yes. It's going to take all of us. And so, hey, if you have, there are a few, if you have an environmental science program, is there a way that we can offer, dual enrollment as a part of our dual enrollment? We do, a lot of our schools do offer AP Environmental Science, which has been a lot of our teachers really take that class and, make it a social environmental justice space. Like, if I could say that in any class that we have, I really see that. Now, everybody doesn't take that AP class, but a lot of our program, and we've included AP Environmental Science in several of our programs too. So we wanted to make sure that was a part of engineering, and it's one of the programs, a study that has it, but we wanted to make sure that was an option for those students, so that we say, hey, the pro is, though, that they're, usually your AP classes are a little smaller. You can focus on, opportunities to develop projects. Like one year when last year I was at HD Woodson as our program coordinator for one of our academies. Our students created geospatial maps for veterans, but they wanted to focus on environments where the veterans could not experience so much PTSD. And so
that's good.
That looked like spaces that were more green, spaces with less noise pollution, spaces that didn't have, especially if you had issues with your lungs, and so less
air pollution. Yeah,
right. Like, what are those spaces that we have in our city, and create a geospatial map where they can then go locate, hey, I have this condition, filter, where can I go? And they worked on that project because we were partnering with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
That's good.
And through them getting to know veterans in that capacity, they also felt an obligation, I feel, to those people now.
Yeah.
Because they had a chance to work with those.
And it's problem solving, and it's the direct application, and it's being able to see the interconnectedness of systems and processes and infrastructures.
They also read that year in English when we talk about interdisciplinary work. The things they carried, which is a book about the Vietnam War, and one of the soldiers and what they had with them when they're out in combat. And so those are the connections and the things that happen. But it's really the collaboration that everybody has to have. But you have to have some EJ, environmental literacy champions in spaces to help. And I don't know how you get more of those. And
like this.
Yes, right, but it's only so much work, that everyone can pull on. And that is the ever-evolving question, even when we have our committee meetings. How can we just, how can we get more boots on the ground?
Yeah.
Support to everyone. Because we've been working on a framework and everything like that. But again, how do we build people's capacity? That's the thing that's missing. But I want people to open their doors to kids and into schools and say, hey, you know what? I don't know how we can all work together to get this done. I don't have a real plan. But, hey, we offer a PhD in environmental science over at Howard. We offer it over here at Hopkins. Mm-hmm. We have a public health. Hey, how can we work together to bring this stuff all together to make a change in our community? That's something we got to do that.
Mm-hmm. That is so good. And I just lost my thought actually. Oh, you were saying that in building the capacity, I was thinking of like the law shows you watch and they go asked and answered. And I feel like you posed the question while also what we've been talking about for the last hour approximately or so is building the capacity of our communities to have a greater understanding, to better be able to recognize the need that exists, to better be able to recognize why these jobs are important and why these things matter. I think it's so incredibly important as we talk about opportunities to feed youth into diverse and really it's about whatever pathway they want to take, right? Like not necessarily funneling them in any one direction or another, but the more aware that they become of the wealth of opportunities, the more informed a decision that they can make about what pathway best fits them and to pivot when need be, right? Because as you said, like the work of life is not just taking a path and walking that for the rest of forever, but it is building your toolbox so that when something happens and you do have to pause and take a step back and readjust and, redo the bricks for fix the holes in the walls and patch things up, that you have a greater tool belt, right? That you have more at your disposal to make informed decisions with, that when you need to pivot, if you need to, hop back into your technical bag for a moment, right? Or if maybe you decide that wasn't the right pathway for you, right? There's always opportunity to take another pathway, right? But again, if nothing else, it does no harm to be aware of these opportunities, and that's what education should be. I was sitting here thinking as you were talking about the project that they did in partnership with the Veterans Association. That is what education is intended to do, right? Maybe not in the traditional sense of our education system, and that's a whole nother podcast, as you said.
It's an interesting thing, though, because I was listening to something not long ago. Education has evolved into many things, and depending on whatever the political situation is going on, that's what we do. Mm-hmm. But at one point in time, and someone brought this back up, we can be civic institutions. High schools can be civic institutions, and that's where you think about how what you teach impacts your, political space, how it impacts. Because you know what, I never forget, when I had a professor who looked at how Black and brown communities engaged, like student government, for example. And students who were more involved in student government then thusly became more engaged in civic matters outside of the school, right? And so how do we get more people engaged? Right, and how do we create more civic institutions in our schools? Yeah. We talk about all the things we need to change and do, but how do we, hold true to our tenets of academics and things like that, but how do we create more civic-minded, young people.
People who are prepared to participate in the civic landscape by the time they graduate, right? Like you think about how many people graduate high school close or at voting age and still only imagine voting as the way that they can participate in civic processes. Couldn't tell you when their school board meeting is. Couldn't tell you even where the city council meets or at what time. Couldn't tell you who their senator is or who their local congressperson is, couldn't tell you all of the representatives who are informing their day-to-day lives, right? Like, these things are so incredibly important, and it's by creating opportunities for them to expand their horizons that they can. And you mentioned earlier that was one of the pins that I forgot about, the importance of culturally relevant education, right? Having role models that look like you, having people who you can relate to, even from a place-based aspect, right? I've worked for many years in the city of Flint and been an advocate for the city of Flint, and there's something special for our youth. One of the hats that I wear is with the Flint Freedom Schools Collaborative, and every summer we run a Freedom School summer program, and the difference that it makes in our youth to see folks from Flint, like folks from their town, like, oh, you live on my block, like, oh, that's my auntie, that's my cousin, that's my folks.
Another thing that we could do better here too is that, engaging our native residents in the work that we do.
Yeah.
Because even as I think about some of the committees and things I sit in, there's a whole bunch of transplants, honestly, that are making making decisions, all well meaning.
Yeah.
But
those who are closest to the disparity or gap should be also closest to the decision-making spaces. There has to be both. That is good. I know we're getting close. It's so funny because when we started, I was like, oh, sometimes it can be hard to fill the full hour, but we've been going, and I want to make sure that as we prepare to come to the end of another great episode of The Green Agenda, I told y'all it was going to be good. I told y'all. I'm just saying. I'm not often wrong about these things, but we always like to end with a call to action. So if they didn't hear anything else you said, which I hope they were listening to everything else, but if they didn't hear anything else, how can parents, child advocates, policymakers, and education leaders support the integration of environmental justice into CTE curricula, and what policies and initiatives are already underway to advance this effort?
So I would say something that we leave out of so many things we talk about youth, especially our parents, like they come from homes and people.
They're not just independent, isolated.
Independent, right? And as a parent, one, being a parent is hard.
First and foremost,
it's hard. It's hard to make the civics and do all the things and just make sure
them well-rounded, keep them in all the things. Yes,
and make sure they survive every day.
And they eat, yes.
It's like, I have to feed you every day.
Several times sometimes.
Right? But what I will say is, what I would say for parents when we talk about environmental justice is just, if you have no time but for one thing, pick a tenant in your home that you can hold to. That will be what your child takes with them to school. That would be what they would take into their lives, and that tenant around environment, focus on possibly doing that in your home, like something we did, and this is very privileged, but just compostable paper plates, right? Compostable forks and things like that. We are very much the house of reusing, although Black people have been reusing things.
Look,
Country Crockett.
I'm saying, I got grocery bags in my house from years ago.
Right. And we have upgraded to reusable bags.
Look at you.
Look. We reuse our bags and stuff. So we've picked the little, the things, right? And if you have but just a little time to think about like one thing to focus on and be knowledgeable of, then do that. Because if every parent could pick one or two, and then your kid talks to this kid and this kid and this kid, that's gonna build the work. That's going to help. But we got to do it all. We kind of all got to do it together if we want to, have a world for our grandkids and folks and, the additional generations that will, come after us. I think that as local and state leaders, bring up the Flint, that is so important, especially here in DC, but in general, like I said, a lot of times when you think about environmental justice and literacy, it is people that are maybe not be from your community, that may not look like you. We got to have the representation, be it the people who are from the space and people that look like the people that live there. So we really need to and make it intergenerational. It needs to be our kids. It needs to be
preaching.
We need, we needs to be young folks doing, young leaders doing the work, veteran leaders doing the work. All of those things matter. And then when we talk about our workforce across the board, this is folks with policy, this is our leaders and parents. We got to talk about jobs in an equal way.
Yes.
And let's talk about it from a financial space, honestly. Like if we're going to really have hard conversations about careers, we have to fill these jobs when it comes down to, we don't have, like, even if we got the trillions of dollars needed to replace every lead service line, we don't even have people to do the work.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even matter, it matters if you get the money.
But then what? Yeah.
We don't have people to do the work, y'all. And so how can we think about our society and our kids when we talk about careers, when we talk about post-secondary options, when we talk about even in high school, the opportunities our students participate in? How can we really tie that to the work that's needed to be done to combat our environmental justice and climate issues? Like I said, it's a tall order because it's not something that we grew up talking about. But I think that over time we can build that capacity, and in our lifetime we will see, we'll see changes, and things like that. And hopefully, even we talk about what would also be great is if we had also influencers, like our kids look at people. We look at people like, I'm not even gonna be like Instagram. You be scrolling TikTok. Learn so much.
I was trying to see what's going on.
Right, but who are ambassadors? How can we get more people to be ambassadors about climate change and things like that? Again, going back to Beyonce and all these people having stadium concerts. Hey, we need your voice.
Yeah.
Because again, y'all having concerts in times where it don't even rain like that here. All of a sudden, it's a downpour for.
My goodness. Yes.
Think about that. And so I think those are the things that we also need to. The people. Everyone needs to do their part.
Yes, that was good. I don't have nothing to add to that. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Good to be here.
Thank you all for joining us as well for another episode of The Green Agenda. You will catch us right back here very, very soon, and we look forward to it. Bye.